Hi everyone, thanks so much for being here today or for watching my video. My name is Shannon and I'm excited to share my research with you titled Elegance and Ambiguity, Courtesan Culture and Gender Fluidity in the Late Ming Dynasty. This project really evolved as I worked. What started as an exploration of opium, gender, and mobility shifted as I dug deeper into the literature. I kept getting pulled towards courtesans, women at the center of so many cultural, aesthetic, and gender contradictions. Instead of forcing the original plan, I trusted the research and pivoted. What emerged was a new focus on how these women performed, subverted, and navigated power, intentionally and with incredible nuance. This research looked at how elite courtesans in late Ming China used performance, aesthetics, and emotional labor to move through systems of gender and power. I draw on Judith Butler's idea that gender isn't something you are, it's something you do. Courtesans perform femininity not as a reflection of inner essence, but as a careful strategic act, a way to survive, influence, and self-express. In anthropology, we're always asking about how identity is shaped by culture and power. And here, courtesans offer a pretty compelling case study in how constructs like virtue, sexuality, and even resistance are embodied, enacted, and negotiated. To situate this discussion, we need to understand the broader context. The late Ming Dynasty was a time of massive cultural creativity, but also huge political instability. Bureaucracy was falling apart, peasant uprisings were growing, and by 1644, the dynasty collapsed under Manchu conquest. In this chaotic environment, traditional ideals were both desperately clung to and radically challenged. Courtesans who didn't fit neatly into Confucian ideas of womanhood became symbols of both cultural refinement and moral danger, a mirror to the empire's own contradictions. Confucian values define proper womanhood as chaste, silent, and tied firmly to family honor. Courtesans didn't follow these rules. They were visible, performed in salons, and published poetry. They didn't belong to kinship networks or ancestral rites, yet many were more educated and accomplished than the wives of the men they entertained. Their existence highlighted a deep contradiction. They lived outside traditional legitimacy, but inside cultural influence. In cities like Suzhou and Nanjing, elite men gathered in tea houses and private salons to perform poetry, paint, and exchange ideas. Courtesans weren't just accessories, they were co-creators of this intellectual culture. They wrote collaborative poetry, offered critique, and carefully crafted their public personas. Scholars like Daria Berg and Joan Weitzel argue that courtesans helped shape the tone and direction of these literati spaces, especially figures like Gumai, who move between artist, companion, and loyalist symbol. This is where Butler's theory comes into play. Courtesans performed idealized femininity through clothing, speech, and body language, but they also crossed paths into masculine domains like poetry and calligraphy. They created hybrid identities that blurred the lines between male and female traits. Rather than being trapped by gender expectations, they navigated them, using gender itself as a flexible and performative tool. Visual culture was just as important as poetry or performance. Courtesan portraits, like you see the black and white up above, circulated among patrons, showing them playing instruments, reading poetry, surrounded by scholarly symbols. But some courtesans, like Gumai, created their own art, like you see below. Their paintings weren't just about beauty. They were claims to authorship and challenges to the idea that women had no public voice in pre-modern China. And while she didn't make it into the final draft of my paper, I really wanted to include Yu Susu here. She's an incredible example of everything that this project has explored. Praised by Hu Yinglin, who even called her Scholar Yu, she excelled at calligraphy, bamboo painting, and poetry, art forms dominated by men at the time. She called herself a female collaborator, linking herself to a tradition of literary courtesans like Yu Tao, who is another famous courtesan figure. Recently, I came across a stunning 4-panel screen of flowers and butterflies that you see here that she painted. Unfortunately, it has a watermark because you had to pay for full access, but it's still pretty powerful to see. Even today, her works are circulating in various auctions. Yu wasn't just a courtesan. She was an artist, an intellectual, and a strategist. While courtesans did wield power, it was pretty fragile and contingent. Their livelihood depended on maintaining favor with wealthy patrons, preserving their appearance, and navigating an ever-changing cultural landscape. Emotional labor was central. They had to charm, provoke, inspire, and perform intimacy. During the collapse of the Ming, courtesans began to take on new roles. Some supported loyalist causes, using their mobility and networks to pass messages or fundraise. Scholar Dorothy Coe writes about how loyalist men saw themselves in the courtesan, exiled, refined, and mourning a lost world. This is a powerful metaphor, but it's also a form of real political participation. Courtesans weren't simply symbols. They were agents, engaging with the politics of their time through the tools available to them: performance, poetry, and relational influence. Despite their influence, most courtesans were erased from official literary and historical memory. Their poetry was often reframed through a male lens, their portraits recast by male artists and collectors. It wasn't just about who got to speak. It was about who got to be remembered and how. Feminist scholars like Grace Fong and Harriet Zerndorfer are working to recover these voices, but so much has already been lost. From an anthropological perspective, this research ties into global conversations about gender, agency, and performance. Courtesans in China shared many similarities with geisha in Japan, kiseng in Korea, and Tai wife in India. All use artistry and effective labor to navigate patriarchal systems. What we see across these examples is not rebellion in the traditional sense, but strategic engagement with the systems that constrain them. They didn't reject power, they reinterpreted it. Courtesans in late Ming China were far more than entertainers. They were cultural producers, literary figures, and political actors. Their performances of gender, virtue, and intimacy were calculated responses to the constraints they faced. Their stories complicate our understanding of agency, gender, and historical memory, and invite future research into how marginalized figures perform and claim power across history. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts you'd like to share, please feel free to drop them in the comment section below. Bye!